So today we're going to be talking about making security culture a part of your organization's culture, ingraining it in your cultural DNA so that rather than security being a discrete function within the business that people often have to be dragged along kicking and screaming towards, you are actually making it a part of the day-to-day operation of the business, highlighting it as a value and building value in that for the teammates on your team so that they have a good reason to listen to you. We're going to be talking about culture as a system within an organization and why it's important. We're going to look at the organizational influences that affect culture and how those can be changed for the desire that you want. The security influences that affect culture. We're going to take a look at some of the details on how you begin to assess that, because what is measured matters. And finally, we're going to talk about the importance of security UX, particularly as it comes to communicating with people and security education. So oftentimes when we think of information technology, InfoSec, security, we think of it as a technology question. We know we'll often repeat people process technology, but in reality, we look at the systems that we maintain, we look at the logs and the reports that they generate. We think of this largely as a technology problem, not realizing that security is actually the intersection point between technology and people. You have a perfectly secure system if you have a server that's locked in a room, powered down with no one who has a key. However, that's not necessarily going to be the most functional for what you need in your day-to-day business. So we need to find solutions that allow people to interact with the technology that they need to get their work done, but to do so in a secure way through the processes that you define. So in other words, it's people. Security is driven by people. When we're talking about culture, it's more than just an HR buzzword or an excuse for giving somebody a poor rating in a job interview. It's not just foosball tables and kegerators or a free dress code or value statements that get dragged out twice a year at the all-hands meeting. It is the expectations and norms within your organization and how the business operates from day to day. Giving it a little bit more of a Webster's defines sort of approach, it defines a complex social system encompassing the behaviors, traditions, values, and interpersonal dynamics of a group. If we think of this as an API for interacting with the people within our organization, right? You have inputs and you have outputs. Our shared and communicated norms, values, and routines are the inputs, along with what the business rewards and punishes. And our outputs are how users behave, whether employees stay or leave, the organizational health, what we hear back in pulse reports, etc. When we look at cultural drivers and incentives, they can come from several sources. The most direct of these would be economic incentives, right? People will pay attention to what affects their bonus. People will pay attention to what affects their budget line items in production. People pay attention to whether their line break happens at a weird point there, what their support or the resource requirements are, whether that is being fulfilled or not. However, we want to think of, we say the economics or the incentives here, but we want to think about more indirect incentives as well. As an example, if we say that making sure that we do comprehensive application testing in the process of development, we are very interested in making sure that we shift left and we have security built in from the very beginning. However, 80% of their bonus is based on hitting the profit objectives and delivering on time. If it comes down to the disagreement between a deadline and fulfilling that security application testing, probably the deadline's going to win because that one hits their pocket, right? If we think about these as less direct incentives, what are we pushing as most important? Are we encouraging collaboration, or are we incentivizing internal politics where if you want to win, that's a limited pie and somebody else has to lose? What are the team objectives? How are they communicated? Are these focused solely on profit, or do they include things like the reputation of the business and the value that that represents? Finally, moral incentives. Are we just checking a box? Are we actually speaking to what a problem is? Are we focused on our profit, or are we focused on our trust and the relationship with those that we serve? Looking at our organizational influences. Quick show of hands, is anybody familiar with the Stop the Line story from Toyota? No, fantastic. I love this story. So in the 80s, Toyota was just getting established as a car manufacturer in the US, and they were struggling with some issues of their perceived reliability. In order to try and address this, there was a line foreman, Taiichi Ono, who said, you know what? Every single employee in this plant has a responsibility for the reliability of what we produce. That means that every single employee is empowered to stop the line if they see something wrong. Big red button, hit it, everything stops, they figure out what the problem is. Now initially, productivity plummeted when they did this, right? People weren't sure if this was something that was going to work. They were seeing that the output from the factory was dropping. However, what happened over time, as they identified those gaps in their process and improved them, is that the productivity slowly rose back up to the same level, however, at a same level of reliability that they maintained when they were just getting started. So they were able to improve the reliability and get back to the same level of productivity. The return on that they saw down the line is that moving into the 90s and into the 2000s, Toyota becomes recognized and known as one of the more reliable car manufacturers out there. So this has to be driven from the top. It can't just be an initiative from middle management or frontline workers. It needs to be communicated as a priority and as an objective from the leaders within the business. We want to look at covert processes. I talked about this very briefly in our first section in terms of incentives, but we can look at this in terms of what motivates us as individuals rather than the incentives at the organizational level. The motivations spoke by individuals. So political covert processes. I need to own this. I can't let anybody else get their hands on it. They're going to mess it up or they're going to take credit. Mental covert processes. Operating from a place of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, concerns that if they don't provide what they are supposed to on the deadline promised, and a raised issue of security may delay that, they're more afraid of losing their job than of delivering something that might or might not have a bug in it. Finally, logistical. This is where we run into poorly incentivized structural challenges. So, a good example of this is the old NIST policy on strong passwords. Prior to, I think, 2017 is when it was revised. That's where we're looking at 16 characters plus, uppercase, lowercase numbers, special characters, random and unique for each and every site or account that we use. That's a system that's made for computers. That's a system that's made for technology, not for humans. We're great at remembering 8 to 11 chunks of information at a time. We're better at remembering names or discrete nouns rather than numbers. This is not a system that works great for us, right? There was a XKCD comic that came out a couple of years before the NIST policy changed, making the argument that longer passwords were better than completely random passwords or passwords that checked the box of each kind of character, and with the added benefit that people have the ability to remember and recall those and actually come up with some unique ones. So if you have a poorly incentivized process or a poorly structured process that incentivizes people to go outside of it or work around it, that's where we end up in situations where somebody runs their finger across the number row, runs their finger across the QWERTY row, presses shift and runs it across the middle row, right? That's not really a secure password. That's going to be broken in a dictionary attack very, very quickly. This also can be just poor documentation. If these processes are not available and reviewed with the people that need to follow them, rather they are known by the people that have written them, that are stored in a drive maybe that people don't go to, that you can't expect people to follow a process that they don't know or don't understand. Now we have the thought, okay, well, we're going to make our people do this. We give them the process. They're going to follow it because compliance mandates it, right? Compliance is an influence. It's not a fix. You need to make sure that when you're driving this, you can underscore a culture through its relation to compliance. You can drive home how important it is to be able to meet the requirements of an audit. However, just checking that box is not a replacement for or a guarantee of the culture being ingrained within the organization itself. Now, that doesn't mean that we just do away with the need to follow security process and we just say, whatever people need to get their work done, put an app on your credit card, that's fine. We'll figure it out later. That doesn't necessarily work. We're not saying that you need to do away with security. Rather, consider the user ability to navigate that process and make sure that we are doing so in a way that they are going to be able to follow. So we talk about how security culture is built within an organization. You can take a lot of different angles on this. You can go very process focused. There are organizations where there will be a committee that's going to create a process document. It's going to be revised. It's going to be road tested and then rolled out for everybody to follow. This is great. It's stable. It's visible. It's standardized. As long as folks are on board and know where to find and follow that process, that can work. Compliance-driven, you can be focused on documentation written towards the requirements of your audit. You know that you have a base set of standards and expectations to meet, and it's repeatable. It is typically something that is going to be revisited on a regular schedule. Security doesn't happen in a static moment in time. It needs to be regularly reviewed and revised as necessary. You see a lot more in the startup space, a more autonomous organizational structure. It's flexible, it's agile, we break things fast, we fail fast and reinvent ourselves, right? It's innovative. It is possible to push a strong security culture here. You just need to make sure that you are making sure people understand that security is a core tenet. We have a hard time quantifying trust as a business resource. It's one of those you know it when you've lost it sort of things, right? If you look at just about any large organization stock in the wake of a major breach report or a major incident, we can see there is a monetary value that is associated with it. Trust is accrued very slowly, but can be lost very quickly. So it is one of the most valuable resources that a business has. And as such, one that is very important to prioritize and to maintain. We look at our different security frameworks. Step one, identifying and assessing our most important assets. And I believe there's a strong argument to make that our reputation or our trust as an organization should be right up towards the top of the list. So, is technology your hammer or just one tool among many? Are you considering the people element, the educational element in making sure that folks are on the same page and understand what you're saying? Or have these playbooks been written to teach out in the annual security training? Everybody signs on the sheet that they know what happens, and God help you if you click the wrong link, right? Put another way, are you planning for security education by assuming failure as an inevitability? Are you assuming that your users are a sore spot that have to be navigated around rather than collaborated with or worked with? A lot of times, security is a source of fear, uncertainty, and doubt for the average worker. They feel like it's a game that they can't win, only lose. They know that if they talk to somebody from security, it means that something has gone wrong or they've messed up. And so they will do just about anything in their power to avoid doing so. How do you address this? One, be their guide. You make the road less scary. Encourage people to reach out to security rather than putting the fear of a deity in them if they click the wrong link. If you have a phishing education seminar and 30% of the people click the link in the test that you do beforehand and 15% people click the link afterwards, you've had a 50% improvement. That sounds great. Put another way, you're only 50% still on fire, right? Somebody someday is going to click that link. Anybody can do it. We can do it. The wrong link on the wrong day can catch anyone. However, If instead you make the metric of success looking at the speed to reporting, that's something that can be improved. And that actually gives the security team a better opportunity to respond in the midst of or before a breach occurs. So, all this sounds great, sure, but how do you measure it? You look at what you say is valued within the organization versus shown is valued. We talk about stability and reliability, adapting and flexibility, working within deadlines or collaboration. How do we work? Do we encourage collaborative work, or is it very top-down, orders-based? And when we look at how we measure these metrics of success, I think that something that can happen is a over-calibration on quantitative metrics. So quantitative metrics are lovely. We can chart them out on a graph. We can see that bar moving up or down over time. We can give a multiple choice survey and weight the scores at the end and see how they land. However, the feedback that we can get solely through quantitative measures is going to be limited. If there's a problem with a process and users are having a hard time navigating it, a quantitative measurement can show you the number of them that failed, but you need to have a qualitative understanding of what their experience is following through. You need that direct feedback from them. It's a lot fuzzier. You can't place it onto a graph, but it's invaluable to be able to understand where a process is going wrong when we may not have the perspective or understanding that a person who relies on following this process every day does, right? So don't try and retrofit a quantitative number to a qualitative piece of data. Recognize that both of these are important elements in being able to measure the success within your organization. Now, talking about that programming language or API for interfacing with the people within our organization, we need to consider whether or not something is going to be functional or intuitive that they're going to be able to navigate. If their understanding is that security is the department of no, they, again, are going to avoid going back when they have questions or they need support. If risk is always perceived as an absolute negative in security, it cuts us off from being able to find the actual appropriate balance. Rather than looking at risk as an absolute, we need to look at risk as a balance of likelihood versus severity. A good example of this that I like to use is biometrics to unlock mobile devices, right? If we look at that in terms of absolute risk, the risk of using a biometric is raising the absolute risk because you still have to have a PIN or a password to unlock that device in the event that the biometric doesn't work. But now you have a second way to unlock it with the biometric. Now, in reality, the much more realistic risk is that device being lost or left somewhere unlocked where anyone can pick it up and find company data on it. Whereas the risk of somebody's biometric being stolen really only applies if you have a threat model that has to worry about people's fingers getting cut off, right? Realistically, what we're much more likely to run into is somebody having an unlocked device and giving them a much more intuitive, natural, and less intrusive way to accomplish that goal of locking their device means a very slight increase in absolute risk for a much greater reduction in effective risk. Then we need to think about who we learn from. We learn from people that we listen to. That may sound like a tautology, but think about it for a moment. We listen to people who we trust, who we respect, who we like, and who engages us. So this is another opportunity where by showing the value to the teammates that you are working with, for example, rather than just communicating strictly the processes that are necessary for the tools and systems that they use within the workplace on a daily basis, include some general security awareness. Let them know about how to keep their social media safe. Give them information for the most common personal email providers on how to enable authentication or set a recovery backup. These are things that are going to help make their life better and safer outside of work. And ultimately, it's going to keep the organization safe because attackers don't clock out at 5. They're going to find people where they're vulnerable, and they're going to take that in. So it really is possible to patch users. You need to engage them. Try and reach out to them in the language that they understand, even if it isn't the exact precise industry term for what we're talking about. Use accessible language. Rather than motivating through punishment, find positive ways for them to interact. Rather than calling everybody into a room who fails the click the link in the phishing exam, celebrate the people who report it first. Have a little, there was a client that we worked with that would 3D print out a little guppy fish and would give it to the first person that reported the phishing test each time that they ran it. This gives them a win. This gives them something to be excited about and proud of rather than just hesitant of. Some good examples of socializing or gamifying security is adding it into the day-to-day conversation of the business. Something that I love seeing is when organizations encourage people in the team chat to share an example of a suspicious email that they got. Hey, I got this. Does this look right? Now, first you want to report that to security, but then once you find it, share that with the group so that people are aware of and thinking about the fact that they too might be getting a suspicious email, so that if they see a similar message, they know not to click on it. And this is now becoming something that, rather than being a point-in-time update that happens periodically, is happening on each and every day. Finally, we want to be sure we are teaching differently. We want to make sure that we are using multimodal methods for different learning styles, that we are considering people's different technical ability levels and cognitive differences, as well as making sure we avoid lectures while increasing engagement. And the version of this on here did not have my last couple slides, so we're just going to sneak this over here. This is the live edit, everyone. Hello? No? Come on. So now that you've gotten your dessert on security education, just a quick tiny bit of vegetables before we hop over to Q&A. As mentioned, I'm here from Blumira. We are the only provider that is able to help small businesses and growing organizations stop or prevent a breach. And we do that by providing tools that are actually built for non-enterprise organizations. When we're looking at detection and response solutions, largely we're looking at tools and services that have been built for large companies who have, at the very least, some dedicated security analysts, if not a full SOC team. We come from that background. Our founders came from running a SOC in a mid-sized organization and then working at an MSP providing security services to other growing organizations who couldn't find the tool that they needed on the market, and so they built it instead. We did that by making it easy, effective, and efficient to operate a threat management, detection, and response platform, even if you have only one or two IT people within your team. We do that by taking head-on the most common challenges in dealing with technologies like SIM or MDR. Typically, these are things that take a long time to set up and even longer time to tune and start getting the actual effective signal out of the greater noise. However, we provide pre-tuned detections that are developed and tested as tuned by our detection engineers, so that by the time a customer goes and adds a drop-in integration and has intelligently suggested to them the detection rules that fit their environment, they are not going to have to go through and keep eyes on glass to make sure that that is actually accurate. Real quick, if you're curious about this, first off, I'll have a lot more than the 1 minute at our booth to talk with you about it. You can also check us out on blumira.com/free, where you can get a free XDR trial as well as a free SIM account after this first 30 days. And we just launched a domain security assessment that helps you to get a quick snapshot in time view of publicly discoverable assets and services associated with your domain. That doesn't even require a Blumira account. Thank you so much.